Oh, okay, I'm live. All right, well, all right, folks, I'm live. I'll wait about 10 minutes, see if anybody else comes on. What I will do in the meantime, hey, I'm welcome everybody. How y'all doing? Good afternoon, good afternoon. Um, yeah, I'm just saying thank you so much for coming out. I guess I hope you all got the notification. Um, as still kind of going with the live session. Just to inform you of a couple of things. As a adjunct lecturer, um, my e-learning options are, you know, not always available, right? So I'm happy to resort to this live platform again for another session with us. So thank you very much for coming out. Now that I'm in my study for a change, I wasn't in my study last time. I could actually share some resource materials I have with you. This is a book I was speaking about last week. This is called The Letters of Margaret Mann, right? And as I said before, she was a protege or student of Casabo. And these are some examples of her artwork. Evening, Danae. How you doing? Right? Like I said, she was a direct, obviously, trainee or direct student or direct recipient of Casabo's method, his techniques, his styles, everything. So as you can see, the titles of here, one is called Maraval River, the other one is called Maraval River. So both pieces of art are called Maraval River, right? And like I was trying to show you, the technique, everything is completely identical, right, to Casabo. There is no deviation from Casabo at all. Even the composition, the technique, the size. This is roughly about 20 inches by 29 inches, right? So it's roughly rectangular as you see here, but approximately twice as big as it is in the reproduction of the book. Okay, but this again, if you just joining us, just make to clarify, this is the work of Margaret Mann, right? So it's somebody who associated with Casabo around the 1850s, and these were the works that she produced. So I can find some more to show you. Right, so you have St. James Barracks, right? Some other military buildings, right? Even Tiffany. More images again. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, I'm kind of just briefly giving you a little bit overview to recap a little bit of what I spoke about in the last lecture, right? Yeah, Genevieve, right? This is the work of Margaret Mann, right? So I could just clarify. And the text, but the book I've got this from, this is actually St. Rosary's Church in Port Spain, before you had Independence Square, right? All these works are roughly about between in the 1850s. There are some variations though. This one here, Bull Drive on the Spanish Main, is obviously a little bit different than what Casabo has produced. And you have another North Coast image here, right? Again, more landscapes. I'm going through the work of Margaret Mann just to, illustrate with you all directly, how obviously you might think this is Casabo's work, but this is not Casabo's work. This is the work of Margaret Mann and somebody who trained directly in the Casabo. So you should be able to see the titles of the artwork as well. And again, the book is not too sure if this book is in the Heritage Library, but it's called The Letters of Margaret Mann. And the reason why I'm not going to read the letters because there's not much correlation between the letters and the artwork. But the one book that I'm a little bit more certain is in the National Library is this one, The 40 Artists of Trinidad and Tobago. And this is a work presented by Holly Guyadine, right? And it was printed about 1980 or so. And in it here, you can zoom into it real quickly. I can kind of make sure that everything's legible. This is the list of artists that are covered in the book. And what you see across, no, what you see asterisk, sorry, is the artist is deceased. And if you see a little cross, that means that they had emigrated or they had left Trinidad. Right? I've definitely had to scan this and put this up so that you could see, at least up till 1980, these are the artists in Trinidad who were, quite prominent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in, although it is the emphasis, I'm kind of trying to focus a little bit more on mid-century. Although we're talking about several things, the real focus of last Wednesday's lecture was the transition from the 1800s to the 1900s. I still have to do the graphs, which I had quickly sketched out while I was lecturing. But so we're basically covering the death of Casabo and the rise of the Society of Independence. Now again, who are the three? There are three key artists you have to remember for the Society of Independence. The three artists are 1, Amy Leong Pang, 2, Hugh Stallmeyer, and 3, a little bit later on, Sybil Latek. Right? Again, 3 artists during 1940s, 1930s, 1940s that you have to kind of, keep very, very close attention to is Amy Leong Pang, that is the founder, Hugh Stallmeyer, right, and Sybil Latek. Okay? Those were essentially the founding members of the Society of Independence. As I say again, the Society of Independence became the Trinidad Art Society. All right, everybody clear with that? What I'm trying to do with this lecture right? So I'm saying that while I could answer your questions about different time periods and all that type of thing too, the real focus of this lecture, so let's turn something off here, is to obviously deal with once the Art Society was kind of founded and begin to gain some prominence, who are the artists that, sort of propelled the society into independence on Trinidad, and then after independence, particularly through the 60s and the 70s, who are the artists, and the real main artist is actually Leroy Clark in the 1970s, right? But let's try to go back a little bit into the artists, like I said, who are dealing with society. You might find I have to repeat myself because as I see people joining, I want to make sure they get this point, right? So again, I'm going to type it out to make it even more. The key artists of the society. Right? Is Amy. And Sybil. Right, so everybody clear on that? I get a response. Just remember those three names, please. Emil Yongpang, Hugh Stallmeyer, Sybil Attuck, right? Key founding members of the Society of Independence, and I must stress the Society of Independence becomes the Society of Independence becomes the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago, right? More Trinidad than Tobago, but becomes the Art Society. And like I said, I'm pretty certain that this book is in the Heritage Library. It's called 40 Artists of Trinidad and Tobago, and dealing with, I'll read it from your key artists, who were trying to, obviously, hi Shanice. Oh, and let me not forget Bosco Holder. So kind of emerging out of those three artists from the 1930s, 1940s, more like late 1930s to 1940s, right? You kind of get into three more artists now who will become their like successors. When I say their successors, there doesn't mean that the three previous artists like Stallmeyer, Attuck, and Leong Pang will all of a sudden stop, because they stay alive for a long time. But in the 1950s, you saw Carlisle Chang, Oswald Chase, and Bosco Holder. So if you do any online research, I'll try and send some images if I can. But Carlisle Chang, Oswald Chase, and Bosco Holder. This is the 1950s now, right? So this is like pre-independence Trinidad. As I said before, the Society of Independence really wants to try to break away from that realism paradigm that Cattermole and as you saw Margaret Mann were fixated on, right? So they were trying to get into things like Cubism, a little bit more abstract expressionism, that type of thing. But they were trying to do essentially a Trinidadian version of it. Keep that in mind. They weren't simply copying. Remember I said before in the last lecture too that when Caribbean artists take up these genres, these styles of painting, they are not just simply copying. They are trying to, because these forms of expression are Afrocentric or pertain to Africa in some way, they are in a sense trying to get to reacquire or to get back in touch with their African heritage, their African ancestry. I want to stress that point over and over and over again, probably to the point that you'll get tired and sick of it and you want to shut me up and beat me up, right? But it is a different thing. Cubism in the European paradigm, the European style, the European school of painting was simply another form of seeing. It was what they called pluralism, right? But in our context in the Caribbean, I have to stress in the Caribbean, right? It was a way of us to use art to get back in touch with who we really are, who is part of our ancestry, the part of our ancestry that was taken away from us due to colonialism, right? I'm trying to find here. So what you have in this text, for example, you may have, like, for example, the work of a short biography and a short example. Unfortunately, productions are very, very poor in this book because it's by a government printery and strictly in black and white, although, the originals are a lot more colorful, right? So we go into Hugh Stallmeyer, for example. And you get a little biography of him, right? Stonemaier grew up in Trinidad during the early period when artworks were in the possession of the very wealthy who could have afforded to import them, especially from the European countries. He studied at the Art Students League in New York, USA, where he obtained a grounding in the technical aspects of art. And having remained there for many years, he was exposed to various trends and influences of artwork. In 1931, a few of the artists trained abroad who were trained abroad formed themselves into a group called the Society of Independents. That's Independents. Stonemaier belonged to this group, which held exhibitions. In April of 1960, Stonemaier held his one-man show from which the National Museum acquired works. Stonemaier now resides in the USA, so obviously emigrated and died away. Right? Now, another artist you may hear of in that period, 1930, who was born in the 1930s, but perhaps a little bit later on, is Noel Vaucresson. Vaucresson was born in 1932, an architect by training, and achieved his master's degree in architecture at McGill University in Canada. His paintings have been locally shown in one-man exhibitions throughout Trinidad as well as in Canada. He is represented in the National Collection of Trinidad and Tobago and in private collections in the Caribbean, Canada, United States, England, and Australia. His works have been shown in the Trinidad and Tobago display at previous Sao Paulo and in other official exhibitions. Vaucresson is a painter whose work ranges from realist. His main themes are based on Trinidad landscapes, street scenes, and buildings. Trying to find somebody here to. Right, so you have here a little profile of Jackie Hingston and Bosco Holder, which I'm about to read out for you because, like I said, the text should be in the library. If it's not in the library, I will try and scan this thing incrementally to show you what it is, right? Like I said, a lot of some of the artists aren't as important as others, and let me just give you very briefly the biographies of Carlisle Chang and Oswald Chase. Carlisle Chang was born in 1921, and he's a painter and muralist, and received a diploma of LCC in the Central School of Art and Design in 1953, while on a British Council scholarship. He was also awarded a scholarship by the Italian government in 1963 and 1964. He received a Hummingbird Medal for Fine Art in 1969 and a Sao Paulo Biennial Bronze Medal in 1963. He has executed murals in several buildings, banks, and offices. His works are in numerous private collections overseas. His paintings have been exhibited in mixed shows in USA, Canada, Britain, Brazil, Colombia, and the West Indies. His main imagery is mainly non-objective, that means non-realistic. His other interests are the crafts and carnival costume designing. Oswald Chase was born in Trinidad in 1930 and studied architecture. He got his degree in architecture in England and Paris, and also at the Bauhaus in Germany. He has traveled in Europe and the United States and lived there as well. He has done experimental work in architecture and in painting, and has created designs for exhibitions of various types, art industry, etc. He has been the recipient of prizes for architectural and other designs. His paintings and drawings have been exhibited in Trinidad, Europe, and the United States. His work in a non-objective idiom and is interested in the effects achieved by a variety of materials and media. At this moment, well, when the book was written in 1980, he is working and living in the United States. Okay, so you get that. So I said we're transitioning from Hugh Stonemaier, Emil Young Pang, and Sybil Attek. We're transitioning now to the 1950s, where you had the prominence of certain people like Carlisle Chang, Oswald Chase, and Bosco Holder, right? I just want to stress that immensely because obviously that will change very shortly. And who the generation of 1962 again? Anyone? So I kind of dealing with things in threes, right? You have three artists for the Society of Independence, three artists for, the Art Society, once it starts to get going. And now I'm asking for three artists that make up the generation of 1962. Which book? This one? No, 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 not Christopher Crozier at ceremony. Christopher Crozier would be in the 1990s. Chen could be one. Chen could be one, but there was a specific. That was somebody who was practicing at that time. Kingston is one of them. Yes, Chloe. Right. So it's Kingston. Two more. Yes, Hinkson, Jackie Hinkson, all you're doing the same thing. Pat Bishop, the next one, you say yes, very good. One more, just one more I'm asking for now. So you have two out of three right now. Yes. It's Pat Bishop. It's Pat Bishop and Minshew. That's all three of them. Leroy Clark just started to enter the art scene, but it wasn't really considered to be of that generation of '62 because he wasn't really a peer, one of their peers, right? At that time, as far as not just simply art, but societal standing, education, that type of thing, right? So Leroy Clark actually has his debut in 1966, and it's called Labor of Love. So some people are asking for the name of the book, right? The name of the book is called 40 Artists of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a very, very thin book, um, printed by the government princery in 1980, right? And like I said, it's written by Holly Gardine, right? And this was taken from my school library because they have to try to throw out this book, right? So I'm gonna pull that up there for everybody to see, right? And like I said, all the pages are blue, so you can't really see anything really. If you look at any particular artist, you won't really get a good idea of the artwork. Um, if, for example, you look up Leroy Clark, you see something like this here, which is not a very good reproduction of the artwork, so it wouldn't really give you a comprehensive thing. Um, a book by Leroy Clark that I know is also available if you all really want to get into Leroy Clark specifically, is this book. It's edited by Caroline Ravello and was published in the early 2000s, like 2003 or so. But most of it is called A Flesh and Salt and Wind and Current, right? And it was written to commemorate Leroy Clark's 60th birthday, because he was born in 1938. And the image that is on the cover of this book is called Weavers of the Dust. And this is a controversial painting. I say controversial. It is the painting that was acquired by the National Museum for $1.2 million TT back in 2007, the end of 2007, right? And this is a painting by Leroy Clark again. For those of you all who now getting accustomed to it, this is called Weavers of the Dust, right? I'll type the title out for you so that will be clear. So this painting was, yeah, you must have seen it. You must have seen it in the gallery. And another painting that is kind of more black and orange. It's called Queen of the Bands, and that is actually meant to accompany this painting. Right? So can everybody see it? Can everybody get a good look at this? I'm seeing a reflection here. Yes, I would recommend if you're studying Leroy Clark, it's a very good buy because it kind of helps to have your personal copy of it, so that you will see um, the various accounts of his work and stuff like that. Let me just read a couple things to it. One thing I want to read in particular is the statements made by um, his some of his peers or his associates on Derek Walcott. Like I said before, Derek Walcott wasn't very flattering of him. I mean, not many people know that Leroy Clark was actually a singer. He tried many things. I mean, he actually on the this is him at age 22, and this is him here in the far corner here, right? There's a band called the Beamers, right? He was a singer in a band called the Beamers. But the real epiphany of Leroy Clark goes into creating artwork like this, and this is in the secondary school textbook as well too. It's called Apotheosis of Iltutmish. I'm talking about the triangular one looks like a big triangle, right? It should be on my right or your left, right? It's called Apotheosis of Iltutmish, and that was done in 1989. But the whole thing about Dwins, and this here is an image of Clark's first exhibition abroad, right? Called Fragments of a Spiritual. And this was held at the Harlem Art Gallery in New York. He was an artist in residence there. And a series of paintings from 71 to 72. And then from 73 to 74, he did the work for his second exhibition, which is called Dwins. And we all know what a Dwen is, right? Anybody know where the word Dwen comes from? I'm trying to ask this question because, again, no, Spanish. I see my Spanish dictionary, my Spanish textbook behind me here. I'm actually equally qualified in Spanish. So, Duen is actually derived from a Spanish word. Yes, lost bit of a child, but I'm saying the word, you have Duen, D-O-U-E-N, in our language, right? I'm trying to ask y'all, does anybody know where that word Duen, D-O-U-E-N, came from? We all know the story, right? Well, I'm trying to show y'all, I'm trying to transition into another book, another artist who I think is as important as Leroy Clark, or even more so. So waiting for any suggestions. Any wild guesses, any suggestions, I'll be very, very appreciative of. I'll give you a chance here because I don't want to bust them off too quickly. Well, actually, the hint, Anissa, is in the word itself. Duen. It sounds very, very similar to the actual Spanish word. That's what I'm trying to. I'm trying to see if anybody knows or anybody could speculate. The word itself is a hint. Nothing comes to mind. Shabana. Okay. The word duen comes from the Spanish word duende, D-U-E-N-D-E. Right? And if you look that word up, that means like a little demon or a little boogeyman, right? A little evil spirit. That's what it means. It means little evil spirit in Spanish, right? So in Spanish, this is how we spell the word D-U-E-N-D-E, and it's pronounced duende. No, Spain. If you want to tell me, it's a Spanish word. Duen, D-O-U-E-N in our language, is D-U-N-D-E in Spanish, right? But it is a very, very important connection to make as far as, our folklore and where our roots come from. And therefore, by extension, where our folklore, so where our roots come from, is a combination, obviously, of our history, the combination of French, combination of Spanish, combination of English, combination of African, combination of East Indian as well too, right? The one artist that to me, as I said, the emphasis on this lecture is the mid 20th century, right? Is Alfredo Cordayo, and I'm not sure if this book is available in the Heritage Library, but this is a book done by Holly Gayadin, again, the same guy who did this book, right? The same author of this book. He did a specific book on Alfredo Cordayo. These are my personal copy because what happened is my school library, these books are old, and the school library was actually throwing them out in a box. So I basically ran to scavenge them, right? So that I have these references because these references are essential to Trinidad art. Well, I'm telling you right now that the word duende, if you type it in, it means little boogeyman or little devil or little evil spirit, right? But the word, because of the pronunciation, it sounds exactly like the word we say. We wouldn't, because we don't speak Spanish, right? We wouldn't write it the same way, but it's pronounced D-U-E-N-D-E. It's pronounced duende, el duende in Spanish, right? And like I said before, but I'm trying to emphasize now, the one artist I feel who really, helped that transition from focusing on landscapes and portraits that we had since Casaubon's time, right? To focusing on our spirituality and other things that make up our identity was this guy, Alfredo Cordayo. A lot of times you won't see him being mentioned in traditional records of our history because he was more seen because his work was done in pen and ink and was in black and white. There are very few examples of his work in watercolor, in color, right? He was regarded, particularly at the time that he practiced, he was regarded as more of an illustrator than an artist, than a fine artist. Although the National Gallery does have examples of his work now, right? So you see, he was born 1913 and died 1971. Died quite tragically in New York City of a heart attack. right? But the real prime of his time was actually during the 70s. No, sorry, the 1950s and 1960s. This is his image right here. And in his own handwriting, I'm going to read out what he said because, unlike the other artists, Kodayo was more concerned with making art accessible. Not simply accessible in the sense of people can acquire a copy of it. He wanted the art to be understandable, right? And this is something that, you know, other artists didn't really care about too much. They thought art was a nice thing, you know, landscapes, portraiture, beauty. They thought the art spoke for itself, basically, right? But Kodayo wanted to do something a little bit different. He wanted to actually create art that the subject matter would be more accessible in itself, and then in turn make things more accessible to everybody as well too. Let me explain that a little bit more in detail. He says, and I quote him right now, and I'm reading this because I'm kind of reading his handwriting, it's a little bit hard to read. Through art, I wish to speak in a language that all should understand, a language of beauty, a, a language of beauty unspoilt by confoundingisms, yet with common understanding and native pride. So I'll read that again. A language of beauty that is unspoilt by confoundingisms, yet rich with common understanding and native pride. In my self imposed job of preservation, the folklore, way of life, games, dances, right? Land, river, and seascapes of my country. I am trying to establish a link with our past in the most comprehensive way that I know. So he really was he really was trying to make art available for everybody, not just the art itself, because some of this book was actually reproduced in newspapers and the mass media. But he was also trying to make art that was accessible to people. And I'm trying to do three things. He was on three main topics he was dealing with, right? I don't know, Chloe. I hope it's not on my side. Um, if anything, you could make a note of the timeline and then try and review it. But let me try to type this out so that in the text at least you'll be able to see, right? So he's saying, can you at least see what I'm typing so that make sure that you'll get what I'm trying to share with you concerning Kodayo? Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that if the feed is breaking up, I'll try to type out, the text so that you'll see it and you can just copy and paste in your notes or make a note of it. But this is what Kodayo said in the first paragraph, and so I'll type out the second paragraph right now. Please forgive me here as I'm typing so I can make everything clearer for everybody. Right. So I want you to look at those particular paragraphs. These are quoted. These are written directly by Kodayo. Right. I want you to look at those two paragraphs very, very, very carefully. Right. Again, I'm going to say, through art, I wish to speak in a language that all should understand. So you want to create any kind of forms of visual forms that people couldn't understand. So, but so that anybody who didn't know art history or didn't have any artistic training would, you know, have to be perplexed or try to figure out what was going on. He wanted the images to sort of be self-explanatory, right? And to that realistic representation. Now, again, this is not realism, okay? This is not typically, I mean, this is Kodayo's genre of artwork I'm dealing with right now. It has some similarities, it has some differences. I will get into those differences and similarities in a little bit more detail. But I really want to spend the time focusing on Kodayo, and I'll go through very specific illustration to show you the categories that Kodayo's work falls into. I'm trying to simplify it as well, so a little bit for you. So that if you happen to see his work, you will sort of know what category to put the work into, right? And then having seen, these kind of complex images by Leroy Clark, right? Learning Kodayo's work will actually help you to understand this work as well too. That follows 10 and 20 years after Kodayo was passed. Okay? So that's my objective. Right. So when you said in my self-enclosed job of preserving the folklore, way of life, games, dances, land, river, and seascapes of my country, I'm trying to establish a link with our past in the most comprehensive way as I know. So he's trying to cover everything, right? And trying and what is possible to make it easy on the spectator. He was really trying to, through the art, make everything as easy as possible to understand. He wanted children to understand it. He wanted people, working class people to understand. He wanted even high class people to understand as well too. Right? What does Xavier say? Right. Okay, Xavier. Sorry. Right. But I'm writing the notes for y'all. You don't understand. So you're gonna trouble Chloe. Right. Right. So what I'm trying to do is there are three categories. I'm trying to do everything in threes, right? So you have three artists of the Society of Independence, three artists of the generation of 1962, right? And I'm going to do three things now that Kodayo's artwork is about. So one of them is the local folklore. Right? The next category is what I call, when you talk about way of life, I call it nostalgia. And the third category is religious rituals. So again, the three categories, you see right in front of you: local folklore, nostalgia, and religious rituals. When I say nostalgia, I mean life in the past. Because even though he's doing these images in the 1960s and 1950s, he is more or less showing life in Trinidad how it was around World War II, pre-World War II time, in the 1930s, 1940s. Right? So there's Nappy Myers, the guy who sang Bring Back the Old Time Days. he is doing something like that, but it is artwork. Is everybody clear on that? I want to make sure everybody's clear on those three categories I've written there before we move on, right? Okay. And it says yes, right. So again, the three categories are nostalgia, local folklore, and religious rituals. Now, let me deal with the like I said, Siobhan, if your stream is sticking, you could ask me to repeat, right? This is Kodayo's image of Dwens. I think you can see it kind of clear because part of it's kind of white, right? So you see the character here of the child with the big straw hat, right? And the foot turned backwards. Yes, Shabana, they're from Kodayo. What I'm doing is if the stream is giving trouble, I'm trying to also type in the notes so that you can understand, right? So you see a series of them, the whole bunch of them here, right? And you have to understand what Kodayo is doing to illustrating the local folklore. What he's doing is actually a powerful thing. This is the Lugahu, right? And what I'm just reading about the Dwens is that Gayadin is explaining. In this drawing, the artist has dramatically emphasized the foreground, which depicts the bank of a stream with a number of Dwens clustered together in a playful mood. There are interesting passages of tonal gradation and sharp contrasts of light and dark. On the right lower corner, the Baliziac plants thrive in profusion. In the background, there is the old village house with children playing in an open yard. Hence the reason for a gathering of Dwens who attempt to lure unchristian children into the forest to lose them. They are little people, wearing broad straw hats over their pigtails. Their feet are turned the wrong way around. Dwens are regarded as mischievous elves, believed to be spirits of babies who died before being christened. They have no faces, yet eat soft foods like young corn, racks, and soft and settled crabbacks. So what you have here in the images, this is the riverbank here, right? And Dwens are all gathered around here. Right? And like I said, they have no faces. They just have a big short hats covering their heads, and then their feet are turned backwards. But you have to understand the symbolism of that, because by a child not being baptized or not being christened, the child has no identity. So that is why the child has no face. Okay? And again, this whole thing about the straw hat, the big straw hat, is again a reference to the plantation. Right? Plantation workers had broad straw hats to cover them from the sun. And it's the Dwen is simply another visual manifestation of the plantocracy or life or suffering under the plantation. Right? And the feet turning backward also means that this character is always moving backwards. So in a perpetual state of backward movement, regardless of what direction it is going. So it's sort of saying that the Dwen is doomed. It's condemned to be living a life of backwardness. Right? Another thing that Pat Bishop sort of explained to me as well too in my conversations with her is that the Dwen is also a manifestation of what she called the sins of the father. That the Dwen is also a realization of things that generations have done. So it's a problem of backwardness, a problem of suffering, a problem of lack of social elevation, a problem of no identity, but also a problem that stems from generational, that's passed on from generation to generation to generation to generation. And the understanding of that is essential to intervene, to say that, I'm going to stop this generational problem, this generational cycle, right? And this is what Leroy Clark has tried to do later on by creating this exhibition of what he called a spiritual malaise called Dwens. And he called it being in a state of dwendom, right? And he has to now elevate himself and slowly get out of dwendom, right? Again, I'll go down to that. Like I said, this is a Leroy Clark word now. Sorry, Douen, right? So this is Leroy Clark's. All right, just want to emphasize that more than anything else, that you'll begin to understand the whole notion of the Dwen. And you'll start to see that the visual representation is actually representing something quite sophisticated. Okay? That even despite having no education, no formal education, and no formal training, that people were able to create these metaphors and these analogies to explain their suffering under the plantation system. I want to stress that again, to the point probably of ad nauseum. These folklore characters were sort of created out of a collective consciousness. So they weren't created by any one particular person, but they were created out of a collective consciousness, and mostly a collective African consciousness, to explain or to represent in a very sophisticated way their suffering, their social situation, and their continued problems under the plantation system. Does everybody get that? I want to make sure that everybody understand that. What Kodayo does actually is quite revolutionary in the sense that by illustrating this thing, remember the folklore was an oral tradition. It was passed from information to generation orally, through storytelling. But now, pay attention to this. Now, through the artwork of Kodayo, you have a visual representation that everybody can understand, right? So before Kodayo came along, when somebody said Dwen, you had to use your imagination to figure out what a Dwen looked like. Now, thanks to Kodayo, once you have these images, you no longer have to worry about that anymore. You immediately have an image that you could relate to. And so it is, in a sense, trying to preserve the local culture and also empowering local people. Because once you have a visual reference, right, you have indirectly empowered people now to retain their oral traditions and make those oral traditions even stronger than they were before. Does everybody agree with that? Right. So here's another image here. Again, the penwork is very intricate. Right, this is Papa Bois. And you can see here the beard figure, right? Obviously he's a horned figure, but he's the guardian of the forest. And what usually happens is that very, very, very often in the distance, you see it in the Dwen's image as well too. Let me just try to go back to that a little bit. There's always way off in the distance, you have this intricate shading and cross hatching of the penwork here, and way off in the distance here, usually highlighted, and with very little detail, you'll have the figures in the background. In the case of the Dwens, here is the children playing, right? That are going to be led astray by the Dwen. You have to know nothing about the Dwen too. The Dwen leads you astray, right? Because the Dwen has no spiritual grounding. The Dwen will find your unsuspecting child, and then take them away from you by leading them astray into the forest where they're supposedly lost forever. Now you have Papa Bois here, and Papa Bois is a guard in the forest. You see him like protecting this deer, right? And then over here are hunters that he's going to, somehow take care of them. In a sense, when I say take care of them, somehow eliminate them rather than trick them or whatever it is, right? And again, each of these characters have very, very specific personality traits, right? Papa Bois, for example, is a very strict vegetarian, so he's holding a fish in his hand. Yeah, you don't see it very clearly here, but he's holding a fish because he's a strict vegetarian. He only eats fish. He does not eat any of the wild of the animals of the forest, right? And he's usually going to, mislead or protect the animals and protect the forest by confusing or dealing with the hunters who are depicted here, right? All right, Supuya, right? Again, an old lady who is sick, who is shedding her skin, right? And you see her peeling off her skin here. Again, very, very intricate penwork, very, very intricate architecture, right? Showing that she's in her bedroom, doing these things down, and she had a little, shelf here with different portions and stuff like that, and the moon is shining outside, so she's about to shed her skin in order to go outside, right? So I'm gonna read. Right, the official spelling of Supuya is SOUCOUYANT. Just curious, I'm pescatarian. Right, if you want to spell Supuya. I'm going to read the description very quickly for you. Right? She, meaning Supuya, is generally regarded as a female vampire who lives alone in some secluded country area. By being alone, she spends her time reading books on the black arts and practicing some form of necromancy. As the years pass by, she becomes a wrinkled old witch or old hag. She is capable of divesting herself of her skin at night, turn into a ball of fire, and floats to the sky to find a sleeping victim in the village. She bites the helpless villager and sucks the blood like a vampire. In the drawing room, there are bottles in a mixing bowl on a shelf, and pieces of bush used in concocting some special brew. The mortar and pestle are essential, for it is under the mortar that she places her skin for safekeeping until she returns to her den before sunrise. In awakening, the victim may discover blue-black markings on legs and arms. It is believed to ward off future encounters. It is believed that to ward off future encounters with the Supuya, a blue cross must be painted on the doors, and pieces of thorny cactus placed near openings over the doors or near the ceiling. So now you know what to do, right? Get your cross and get your crucifix and painted blue. And if you wake up in the morning with any unexpected bruises, you'll now have an idea of where they came from. Right. The La Diablesse. That's La Diablesse, L-I. So I'll spell out Supuya La Diablesse for you. So Supuya. Yes, Anita, that's true. And this here is the image of the La Diablesse. Right? Now I said there are some if you look online, there are some watercolor renderings of these images as well too, but very few. Most of them were done in pen and ink And like I said, most of them were considered to be more like graphic art and illustrative art rather than fine art. But when I explain the sophistication that goes into these images, you're now seeing the sophistication that goes into the folklore. I'll now try to get into the sophistication of Kodairo's images so that hopefully you'll appreciate Kodaira even more, right? And what you see from the larger bless here is that off in the distance, you already have that's her prey, right? She has one good foot, one cow foot, right? Face like a skull, but it's usually represented as a very very beautiful woman. And what is also part of the larger bless's character is that she's not necessarily a Negro woman. She's not necessarily a black woman. She's a woman of mixed heritage. She's more of a mulatto, right? And that, if you kind of remember what we talked about a little bit in Wilfredo Lam last lecture, is that the section the issue of the mulatto is a very very sensitive issue in Caribbean art because this person who's half caste or half breed, as you say, is going to be looked at by African people in a slightly negative light, and because they are mixed with white with white genetic background, they also have more appeal to the white class, right? And in this case, the white class is the plantation class. But in our folklore, the Laja Bless is using that sexuality to again empower the lower classes or the weaker or the more underprivileged members of society, because she's going to use her mixed ethnicity in order to be more accessible to the plantation owner, right? And the story of Elijah Bless is that they entice an unsuspecting male victim, and then lose him again, right? So that later he's found the following day, you know, dead some way, or tied up in a tree lance nest or something like that is a usual end of the story, right? But in this one, it says that she enjoys dancing the ballet, right? So what you have in this part here so while she's kind of like floating to the forest, right, and her prey is this gentleman here in the top half in tuxedo, right? This is her intended victim, but where she has come from is the ballet ritual, right? So Kodaira is showing that she has come from that ritual that she likes, right, and is now heading towards her target, which is this figure right here. And of course, just behind there's the big silk cotton tree, with all the vines and the veins and stuff like that as well, so, right? But that is as far as the folklore is concerned. So what I've dealt with the Supuya, the Duen, Lajabas, Papaboa, and stuff like that. That is only one category of Kodayo, right? And then now we're going to deal with the nostalgia aspect of it. I'm trying to find a specific one before I talk very specifically about the race. So we're going to nostalgia now. So we move from folklore and we're going towards nostalgia. Yes, Anissa. So like I said before, just a follow-up guy. I know I might have to repeat myself a little bit more often. We're moving from the folklore and we're going towards images of nostalgia. Right? Here we see this image. This image is called the Fry Shop. Again, the name of this image is the Fry Shop. I'll type out the title for you. Now, what I want to show in this image is that Kodayo was trying to make, show things. This image was done in 1964. But it was meant to show a time that was about 20 or 25 years before, right? In the 1930s, 1940s, around the time of World War II, where people, dock workers used to conglomerate to buy fried bacon, fried swordfish, and this kind of thing from these particular shops that would be in downtown Port of Spain. I want to make sure that people understand that, right? So even though you have the image and you have its date, right? It was done to represent a time long before, right? It was meant to represent a time around 1930s, 1940s, when people used to, again, conglomerate to buy things at what they call fried shops, where they would, buy fried bake, have a cup of coffee, as they either going out to work or they just come back from working from a hard day's work, those type of things. But you would find in one image, Kodayo was trying to say several things going on at one time, right? Now, in the images that are dealing with nostalgia, right? Many of the images, you didn't see it too much in his previous images, but he had a dog. All you dog lovers out there, and he always managed to squeeze in the dog. When it was an image about nostalgia, he managed to squeeze the dog sleeping, lying down sleeping somewhere, right? And what he was trying to show in this image, apart from simply, reflecting a nice, idyllic, sort of, homely image, is how different levels of society in Trinidad integrated with each other. Yeah, Timothy, you're now coming on? Right? So you see here the woman is frying up the bakes, and she has a bakes in a coal pot that has a pan with oil and it's frying up the bakes inside here. Her son is trying to do something and the little dog is under here. You have a man eating here, and you have a white person, a local white, buying his stuff essentially to the side door. Right? Because this was a place that was usually frequented by members of the lower class, right? Dock workers, laborers, that type of thing. You see, you have a little policeman here and a guy talking, having coffee in the background here. But this Caucasian Trinidadian is sort of buying his fries on the side, so to speak, because he wants to be discreet. And people of the plantation class didn't really, didn't want to become too closely fraternized with the lower class. So what I'm trying to say is that there was some sense of sophistication and some sense of commentary going on in Kodayo's work. So it's not all completely hunky-dory and lovey-dovey and idealistic, right? It is trying to show in a very, very subtle way, right, the class divisions. Apart from the classes coming together in this particular location, you're also getting a very subtle class division going on, right? Let me just read the commentary to you very quickly, right? Prior to the last World War, there was a proliferation of unpretentious fry shops in Port of Spain, which served accra and float fish and coffee. The aroma was in the air, even at quite some distance from the hub of activity. The fry shop was a meeting place for men of various social levels. The businessman, the dock worker, the vagrant, the roving guitarist, all came to the affable fries woman to taste of her delicious fare. The Creole white gentleman is permitted to enter the back door. Remember I asked about that just now, right? It was not proper for him to eat at the shop. So he took his fried items, home to his family. The little boy with his with his school cap. I mean, this little boy right there, right? The little boy with his school cap may be the Lee's grandson. He helps her by fanning the glowing coals. On the coal pot is a skewer with the floats. There's another with a kettle of coffee. On the table can be seen a tray of prepared dough, a bottle of oil, and slices of fish in a bowl. Even in this past era, the fry shop was a fast food outlet serving the needs of a close knit community. So I want to show you that even though it is showing in a very, very subtle and sophisticated way, that you had unity, but you also had division, right? And I dare to say, it is something that Kodayo handles quite masterfully in this image. It's not as like you have this rigid, you know, black plantation, black workers can't affiliate with the white workers, with the white owners, right? You have a sharp distinction between the two, right? You have the white Creole among everybody, but you have sort of to sort of be discreet, and she is trying to obviously look at him in a sort of a sort of expression that is like, yeah, you're my customer, yeah, I like you, but you're not one of us. You know what I mean? All of that is summed up very, very eloquently in the image, and it's something that when you see it and you sort of study it, you really start to say, right, I'm saying that all of these different social dynamics he is basically encapsulating in one single image. I imagine trying to capture a very, very subtle expression with the eyes turned to him and the head cocked to her side, while she's doing something. While her little boy here, whether it's her son or her grandson, is attending to something. While this is going on, while the guy is playing guitar, while the dog is sleeping, while this man is eating, while the vagrant is looking on, hoping to get a little piece. Right? While these gentlemen in the back are engaged in a conversation over coffee. Right? It is very, very sophisticated art making, and that is something it was very sad, unfortunate that it wasn't appreciated at the time. That and particularly this image, because I really studied this image very, very carefully, right? To see all these different things going on. You have a poster here, a playbill of like a performance, right? Some obviously a foreign play, right? All these things are going on, and all of these things are managed to be captured in a single image. That's probably a little bit bigger than the reproduction I have here in this book. That is the kind of sophistication and complexity that, like I said, Kodayo was known for. Okay? You have another one here, is it called Downtown Port of Spain? Right, when they still had tram cars and horse-drawn carriages and stuff like that. Again, this image was done, can't really see a date on it, but mostly done in either the 1960s or 1950s. And again, right here in the front, you're in the foreground now, hiding in plain sight is a sleeping dog. Right? And again, there's a sense of nostalgia as to how things were. Right? Another one, the Portuguese shop. There's a meat shop. And again, it's trying to show, the complexity. You see now that the dark-skinned people in the foreground, and their backs are turned towards you. These people in the foreground are the customers. And this here is obviously the proprietor and his family members helping out here. Right? So I've done with 3 images that sort of teach you about nostalgia. And now I'll get into religious rituals, because I want to stress that the religious rituals were non-Christian. First, you have the limbo. Everybody knows the limbo, right? So I'll type in the title, just Limbo. Yes, they're saying a social message as well, Nisa, right? And I think that is part of the, but it's sending that social message in a very very subtle, delicate way. It's not saying oh, the white man is bad. He's just saying that this is our society, and the white patron has to get his fried items a little bit more discreetly than the other people. He can't hang around too long in the shop, right? And then the other people who are sitting there and talking and socializing and everything, right? This one here is a Hindu festival called Satnarayan Kata. I don't think anybody, it's supposed to be a festival concerning the moon, right? Yes, yes, I know this. I was commenting on the previous piece. So I'm mentioning Limbo, which I just showed. I know the one before that called the Fried Shop is what you were talking about concerning social commentary, right? But this is a Satnarayan Kata, right? And it's obviously a Hindu festival concerning the full moon. And I'll just read out to you very quickly. The artist has captured in this drawing the atmosphere of a rural Hindu community, almost potentially positioned to the open space, is a typical example of a rustic dwelling, complete with flags in the background and carts in the foreground. It is essentially a horizontal composition, the rows of figures being placed at three levels and kept well within the picture space, as the rooftop seems to emphasize the framing of the groups actively engaged in the feast at the end of the kata. Much attention has been given to the fine details of this occasion. It is customary among the faithful Hindus to hold a Satnarayan Kata around the period of the full moon. It is a prayer meeting over which the village pundit presides. He offers prayers at which offerings are made to the deity of peace and prosperity at the home of the host. Villagers are usually invited to participate in this family observance. After the devotions, the men sit in the murai, an open extension of the house, to enjoy a meal of simple foods, vegetables, and delicacies, and listen to the advice which the pundit gives the head of the household. In the background, the cook and servers are busily engaged in their duties, while the women folk keep themselves within the confines of the house and lend an ear to the proceedings. So, just like I said, just knowing those specific aspects of the ritual, you're seeing here the pundits in this section of the composition, the men receiving the offerings and making the offerings, and the women in the background, right? Yes, Shivana, we have moved from, so we dealt with three examples of nostalgia, right? And now we move into the religious segment. So I've dealt with folklore, I've dealt with nostalgia, and now I'm dealing with religion. Okay? So I've dealt with limbo, which is an African ritual, and now I'm dealing with a Hindu ritual, and then I'll get into the Hosei, which is a Muslim and Islamic ritual, right? So again, for Hosei, you have something here called a fire pass. It's not exclusively Islamic, but it also deals with another aspect of East Indian culture, right? Again, it's a Hindu tradition, but it's also, I guess, in some ways a reference to Hosei as well, right? You have another one called Shango, some other African ritual, right? It's more dealing with Orisha, But again, these one the shadow ones has been fairly popular, has been shown several times, I think, right? But again, turning, right? What I wanted to try to deal with now, having now that we have seen, images in all three categories, is the issue of composition. Because, like I said before, as we saw in the case of the fry shop, the images are quite sophisticated in their expression and how, not simply what they're showing, but how they're showing it. Trying to find someone here. So I'm going back to fry shop as an example, right? I'm trying to deal with the composition now. We dealt with the content before, but I'm dealing in a visual sense very, very carefully with the level of sophistication you see in the composition of the image, right? We talk about the very subtle, the subtle rendering of the expression of one's face and so on, right? Now, if I were to find an image that's probably a little bit simpler, I don't have too many people in it. So I want to show us very specific points. Okay, let's look at the Shango image, for example. Well, you see a guy walking here with a candle, a double-sided candle, the sword in the center, right? The composition of Kodara's images, like I said, like I will try to explain. I don't know if you may agree with me or not, because a little bit subjective, but it is quite sophisticated, right? Even though he is trying to, remember in the beginning, I said he was trying to make the arts accessible, right? Make the arts, universal, make the art easy to understand. But he was employing very sophisticated visual devices in order to achieve that objective. Does everybody agree with that or not? Right? Yes, there is the detail and the pen work and so on. But what I find is very, very intriguing is that all the images, and you can try to look at them. I'm trying to show a simpler images because the fry shop was actually when I first noticed it in, right? But all the images are roughly designed into a third. So one third here, one third in the middle, right? A third at the side. And that, of course, is what's called the 2/3 rule, or the golden section rule in art in composition, right? Not only do you have objects divided into thirds, as far as the overall composition is concerned, but you also have within the third a sort of visual relationship. Yes, you also at the museum. I know the reproductions in the museum are kind of turning brown. So if we go back to the fry shop, which is a more complicated image, right? You'll see it roughly. I mean, saying very, 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 very approximately. You have the image. You have the division into thirds again, roughly this way, in the middle, and at the side, right? I want to also try to show that within the third, there's also a very loose composition. You can kind of pick out three things. For example, in this section right here, but we look at this section alone, right? You can pick out the white man, the vagrant, and dock worker in that one third here. In this section here, you have in this middle part here, you probably have the woman, her child, and the clay pot here, right? The coal pot. And then kind of loosely in this last section here, you have the guitarist and these two men in the background. So everything is not only simply divided proportionally into threes, but within each third, you also have three major elements, right? And while that may not be necessarily something that is required for the exam, it is something to really appreciate the sophistication, the artistic sophistication of Kodayo. And what I'm trying to show is that Kodayo took local folklore that was, considered to be something backward, considered to be something for illiterate people, and made a high art out of it. And just like other people, in other civilizations that, elevated poor people, elevate people on the lower social level into, a higher standing through art. This is exactly what Kodayo was doing, but he wasn't doing it in a realist um, tradition, right? He was doing it in a more graphic, illustrative manner. Yeah, right. So I want you to at least have some appreciation. Now, tell me if you all disagree. But I want you to have some appreciation for the artistic sophistication that Kodayo added to documenting life in Trinidad. And he sort of broke away from this kind of bourgeois sort of, nice landscapes, nice big buildings, people off in the distance, traditional portraiture. He sort of broke away from all of that and wanted to show life as it really was. Just want to try to get people to add in the feed here if they agree and hopefully how much they agree. Right? I'm also glad that you all saw these images when you all went to the National Gallery not too long ago, before this COVID-19 virus started killing people. Anyone? Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, Shabana. Right? So, like I said, Kodayo, it was because of Kodayo. Now, you still had other artists. Remember, you had Jackie Hinkson and many other artists, Bokaso, who I also mentioned as well, too. They will continue drawing and painting landscapes. Right? Bosco Holder will do portraits, will do nudes, that type of thing throughout all the 50s and 60s and 70s. But Kodayo literally inserted a very, very essential um, addition or new dimension in Trinidadian art. My laptop right here. Right? And what he did, I'll try and post about an article on, although it's not really an academic article, on Kodayo that was written a few years ago. Um, that, really dealt with his whole tradition and his whole addition to art, right? And show that. I'll look for something here quickly. But the reason why I said that folklore is very essential, because, again, I have to reiterate that the folklore empowered Trinidadians. It empowered them to retain their folklore and their culture that was, very, very vulnerable because it was an oral tradition. Yes, Shivana, that's the next thing too, right? Throughout the middle of the 20th century, it was around mostly between 1950 and 1960, when artists started to emerge, they weren't, a very, very important point made by Shivana there, they weren't copying each other. Each artist was doing, they were drawing together and painting together everything, but they were doing their own style. They were really trying to visually show their own identity. I mean, artistically, sorry, present their personal identity. Right? That's a very important point. Trying to find something here quickly. Show up with fight. So, Give me a second here. And most importantly, the styles that you now begin to see in Jackie Hinkson, Vokraso, Chalal Chang, and so on, they're obviously very different to what um, Casabo and Michael and Margaret Mann were doing roughly 100 years before, right? So there's a video I want you all to refer to. Can I watch videos in this thing, way? But knowing what we know now, um, knowing specifically what Kodayo did in the mid 20th century, which is mostly in the early 1960s, late 50s, early 1960s, you can sort of get a better appreciation that the artists who followed and relied on folklore, mainly Leroy Clark, and later on Peter Minshall in his performance called River, that Kodayo really laid the foundation for implementing folklore in art. I want to make sure that you'll understand that, and if you'll have any disagreements, please articulate it on the live feed on the live chat right now, please. Right, so the name I'm trying to do is Peppy Chloe, right? So this video here is a video I want you to watch, um, hopefully after the lecture is over, and it's called The Lost Books of Kalal Chang. And in it, you'll obviously see a lot of the important works. Of course, the most important work is a mural. Um, that was done in 1962. And most importantly, it was destroyed in 1977. Does anybody know why it was destroyed? Does anybody know about the painting I'm talking about? The big mural. Again, I'm just getting silence. No. Okay. I will do what I'll type in. I'm trying to find a decent production here. Share the link. Right, so it's basically this big mural, like a out, and the person's outstretched like this, right, rising up to the rising sun. And on the left side of the image, you have Amerindians. On the right side, you have I don't care about his money. Yeah? Right, on the left side, you have mostly Amerindian iconography, and on the right side, you have the folklore that was sort of alluded to in the work by Kodayo and so on. So on the left side you have Amerindians, and then on the right side you have like a Papa Bois figure in the background, and you have images one curled up in the fetal position, other figures are, sort of holding their heads in anguish, right? Everybody see that? Yeah, that painting used to be above the baggage claim area in the Piarco airport in the 1960s and 1970s. I vaguely remember it as a child, right? And the video explains in quite interesting detail the story that led, supposedly, I'm gonna say it's then who was ultimately responsible, right? But it was a big mural that covered the entire wall, and it was where you had a carousel with the baggage coming out, right? The building was the painting was right smack bang in the on a big wall that was where the suitcases passed through, right? And in 1977, when the renovations were done on the Piarco Airport to expand the terminal building, the painting was smashed up and destroyed completely, right? Um, that video, like I said, it is something that if you want to know about Carl Chang, it is absolutely essential viewing, um, and as well too, it sort of shows and it sort of insinuates in a very very not so subtle way that how traumatized and how difficult it was for Carl Chan to see that something like that happen to his artwork, right? Other works that have miraculously have strangely mysteriously disappeared as well too, right? And in a sense, how little the government and yeah, Shivana, the Papa Bois character, like I said, if you look on the right side of the painting, you'll see something that looks like a tree, and onto that tree is like an African mask. It is behind the human figures that are kind of crouched down. Right? Yeah, well, the whole story, like I said, watch the film. I don't want to get too much into explaining the whole thing because you will see interviews with Carl Chan himself, interview with Hector McLean, who was a minister of planning at that time, and then an interview with Emile Elias, who was still operating today as a contractor, right? And how they went through with they tried to save the painting, and when they was finally given permission to see the area, right? They came forward and the painting was just smashed up into little pieces, right? But it goes to show the how art has been treated, but in the 70s, and it was all the film was also done at a time when Carl Chang was pretty late advanced in his terminal disease. So even though it has interviews with Carl Chang, it also has the section in the video when in Carl Chang's funeral when Peter Minshall delivered the eulogy, right? So I want to make it very clear that that this particular video is really essential viewing for understanding local art. The other video, obviously, I want to pull up is the playlist on Minshaw's River. I was hoping to show us in class, but I was on DVD. But the that's the video quality of this. It's actually in 6 parts, and each part is about roughly 5-10 minutes long. Right, the video itself is not long at all. Oh, crap. Now in River, you had 3 parts, right? There was River, was 1983. Callaloo was 1984. And the Golden Calabash of 1985. Does everybody know Man Crab? Anyone? Anyone? I'm saying yes. I'm not so sure what you're saying yes. So you all know what Man Crab looks like? Copy it here for you. Yeah, the costume of Minson. Wow, okay, you're discussing the design. Okay. Do you all know about the washerwoman that is the carnival queen to that band as well too? This here is the image of the washerwoman that I want to make sure that you all know what the washerwoman looks like, what man crab looks like. Okay, so y'all, let me just ask a question, people. I need to know. Do y'all know what the man crab looks like, and what does the washerwoman look like? That's what I want to make sure that you all know before I proceed. Yes, the crab is upside down. What it is that the costume, the man is standing upright, and so the man is standing upright here, right? And the claws and the arms or whatever it is are pointing upwards, right? That was explained in the video that they want to invert the crab to make it look more menacing, so that the claws and things look more like weapons, right? But the narrative is this: you'll see it in the video that um the yes, Javier doing gang signs, yeah, right, all right, right. Well, where were you all the time, Javier? All right. So the story is in the river that the people in the river are all dressed in pristine white costumes, right? And the they live ideally, they live in harmony with nature, right? And washerwoman, the carnival queen, is their leader, their matriarch, right? And then in so that is basically the performance on Carnival Monday. That everybody's happily chipping along, right? Everybody's nicely dressed in white, and everything's white and beautiful. And then the narrative is that in that period between Carnival Monday and Carnival Tuesday, the night of Carnival Monday and Carnival Tuesday, right? Man Crab, who is the Carnival King, distracts the people with his colorful technology, right? And then poisons the river. He kills washerwoman and poisons the river. So that the performance in Carnival Tuesday now is that is that the sorry, on Carnival Tuesday, washerwoman is killed. She's basically her body is being carried out on a funeral pyre, and then everybody breaks into this wild frenzy because they've now been corrupted by man crab. So each masquerade is given like water based dye in like three different colors, and they all spring into each other, and the whole thing gets all muddled up in this kind of wild frenzied color thing, right? And that is the story basically. Man crab, evil wins, right? In the following, it was so successful, at least from a carnival point of view, at least from an artistic point of view, it was so successful that there were two more sequels. They eventually decided to have a trilogy, right? One of them being so Callaloo now. Callaloo comes around 1984, and Callaloo is the birth child, is the love child of the washerwoman before she died, and Papa Bois, right? And Callaloo, so you have Callaloo as the child, the offspring, right, of the good forces of nature. And then out of Man Crab comes his daughter, Madame Hiroshima. Okay? And she is symbolized by the atomic bomb. Right? So out of Man Crab all of a sudden springs out this thing. This entity called Madame Hiroshima, which is his daughter. And that's Callaloo. And the golden calabash, he was trying to show that he had the seven deadly sins. But in addition to that, the story ends that the golden calabash is like this holy grail. That whoever gets hold of this drinking vessel, whether it be the forces of good or the forces of evil, will have infinite power. So he kind of leaves the story open, right? Sorry. And that, in essence, is the trilogy. But going back to Man Crab and Washerwoman, the whole story of the river 1983. This was the first time, and it was very groundbreaking at the time, that people considered, was bold enough to introduce an art performance in the carnival. And let me explain that. Now, again, that's very subjective. You could say carnival was always artistic, carnival always had an artistic dimension, but the two were always kept separate, right? And that's one thing I want to very, very, make very, very clear. You had your traditional mass characters, right? And you had which are more or less created by the local the working class people, right? Yeah, well, he just says mass as art. If you ever talk to him directly, right? And it's nothing more than that. It's just mass as art, right? That's what he says. So I'll type that in as a mantra of Minshall. More than that, right? But in making mass as art, right, it is obviously elevating the carnival masquerade to something artistic, to something powerful, to something that is beyond. That's a very important point. Beyond the 2 days of carnival, because you're sort of meant to assume that the performance continues afterwards. It doesn't begin on Carnival Monday and end on Carnival Tuesday. It has a background to it that was there before the carnival, and the consequences of the consequences of Mancrab's corruption. You can kind of see are even continuing from that day of February 1983 when they had the carnival, right? To now that we live in the age of Mancrab, we live in this age of technology becoming rampant, technology killing us. We live in the age of disease. We live in the age of selfishness, of greed, right? Of deception, right? Here's Xavier. What kind of stat you gonna get? All right. So I want you to understand the whole concept of what Minshall was doing with River, and then tying that back into what Kodayo did, because when Kodayo introduced folklore into our art in the 1950s, 1960s, right? And then you had Leroy Clark coming along and taking that folklore and developing it into a central theme for his artwork, right? That was more sophisticated and more abstract. And then Minshall comes around in 1983 and sort of takes that folklore impetus and now mix it into a carnival mass performance, right? I want to kind of emphasize that lineage. Is everybody with me on that? Yeah, nothing again. I'm getting a delay, right? So there's a direct use of folklore from Kodayo to Leroy Clark to Peter Minshall. I want to establish that, right? Just Siobhan, I'm just typing it out so that you could see more clearly. The other islands have folklore, right? But as far as their art historical development is concerned, none of them, folklore doesn't play such a key role as it does in Trinidad's art. And there's something very, very strange and very, very unique about Trinidad's art, right? I want to very, kind of get you to focus on as well too. Does everybody more or less okay with what I've typed out here in the live feed? I don't know how much of a delay it is, but right. So Chloe says yes, Chris Zabi says yes. Alright, cool. Um and like I said, it's something that is very, strange and very unique to Trinidad's art. It's not just simply the presence of folklore in the art, but the emphasis on it, right? Because folklore plays a very, very key role in our artistic development. Now, that being said, I keep on having to reiterate that the other genres of art still continue. There's still the old-fashioned landscape, lovely pastoral scenes of people playing cricket and so on, right? Sunrises, sunsets, donkey carts, that type of thing, right? Very nice images, trees, seascapes, that type of thing. It's not typical, stereotypical tropical scenery. But now you have folklore. Now you have an artistic dimension that is, local. That is more or less local, or dare to say at least regional. Right? But I want to make sure that you'll leave the session today understanding, the key role that folklore has played. And this part of a linear development in a sense of getting a local identity. I want to read this is a book now that's there's an article by Christopher Cozier in this magazine. This is, like I said, one of the lovely lovely publications that were done, and unfortunately, it's no longer in print. Right? This is a magazine called Gallery that was printed in 1992. It's obviously commemorating the time when Derek Walcott achieved the prize for Nobel the Nobel Prize for Literature, right? And I want to kind of highlight one in it. Maybe I can't even fit it in my scanner, so there's a very long article. This section here on Sybil Atek, right? Dealing with biographical information. But more than that, I want to get into the whole issue of this article by Christopher Cozier called Searching for a Way Out. And this is where the whole issue of conceptual art comes into play. Now, let me ask you something very quickly before I continue. The videos I posted up on the student on the classroom app. Please be honest with me. If you haven't seen them, let me know. But I need to know if you have seen those videos. Not yet. Nobody yet. Yeah, Vanessa was able to do anything. Kira. All right. It's very important, particularly the one called "Who's Afraid of Conceptual Art." I want you to see that video, please. Right? The other ones aren't so important, but the issue of conceptual art is very important because. Oh, so, okay. Which ones have you seen, Surumi? As I say that you're in the process of watching them. Okay, cool. Dene has at least seen half the Banker's Guide to Art. What I want to stress with Dene is a section on the salons and the way that art was sold in in 19th century France. I want to kind of zone in on that particular. Oh, I did. I'm not too sure. I don't think I remember pulling it up. But the real issue in the Banker's Guide to Art is the section where it deals with it's pretty early on in the video too, where it deals with how art is sold. Because remember you used to have what's called a salon. Not a hairdressing salon, but a salon was a big exhibition hall. And these big, these areas were filled with paintings from floor to ceiling, right? And what happened was that like I said, this was the time of Casabo. This was the time that Casabo was trained in and time he practiced in. But I was saying that Casabo did not have to go through that kind of cutthroat competition, right? He just relied when he moved back to Trinidad. He relied on the patronage of his, of high society, and unfortunately, that worked very well for him in his early career. But later on, as he aged, as people moved out, people moved around and stuff like that, that no longer was the case, and that is why it was a little bit unfortunate that he wasn't able to gain recognition in selling his work in that way, right? But keeping that aside, pushing that aside, because like I said, we kind of done with the realism aspect of and Casamo's influence, and we've now moved into the Society of Independence, who are do their own thing, and then now the Art Society, and now you have the people like Leroy Clark, who is the Afrocentric artist, and then people like Minshall, who are now bringing art into the Carnival Masquerade, and coming out of that lineage, right? So I'll take that lineage into it. We have realism from Casabo. To the society. And then to the Art Society. I'm putting in brackets here, 1950s. And we have the same time, 1950s, 1960s. Kodayo. Right? Then you have the generation of 1962, right? And then you have Leroy Clark, who became prominent in 1970s, 1980s. Around that same time too. Oh shit. Forgot to add. Prominent, so mostly Leroy Clark and Kalal Chang, right? Then you have Peter Minshall. Another video I have to show you is the opening of the Boston Olympics. This video I'm putting to you all now is the opening of the Summer Olympics in Barcelona, Spain, in 1992. So you can see from the magazine here that was done. 1992 was a hell of a year for the Caribbean, right? You had Derek Walcott getting the Nobel Prize, and you also had the Barcelona Olympics, right? And it was a time that that the Caribbean, it felt as if the Caribbean art was getting somewhere, was making headway. No, Jean-David, I'm trying to explain. Minshall arrived on the art scene along with Jackie Hinkson and Pat Bishop. That's when they arrived, right? But I'm saying like most of Minshall's practice as a mask maker and stuff like that, right? Extended from the 70s on to the 80s. Remember, he came back in 1970. He went to England to study and do theater, and then came back around 1977, right? And every successive mask after that was successively bigger and more elaborate until River in 1983, where the mask, the artistry wasn't just simply that. It's about the artistry and design of the masquerade. It was more about the narrative behind the masquerade as well too, and the fusion between art and carnival. Right? I'm trying to find a spot here where it's dealing with very specifically the issue of let me just read the editorial written by Jeffrey McLean back in 1992. Right, when this was published. Caribbean artists have come into their own. With the use of the dancing mobiles of Peter Minshall opening the Barcelona Olympic Games and the award of the Nobel Prize for Literature going to Derek Walcott, Gallery wishes to congratulate those two artists on their achievements. The attention and focus on the Caribbean as a result will do much to promote the region in terms of its cultural and artistic significance. Right? So I want to stress that, right? That 1992 was a very, very, bumper year for the arts because it sort of was a year that seemed to put us on the map, right? As far as, imagine, in a place, in a region as small as ours, in the English-speaking Caribbean in particular, that, that's only comprised of, several little islands and about 6 million people, that you can produce somebody like Derek Walcott, right? And on top of that, now you have a master designer and somebody doing the from Little Trinidad doing the Olympic Games, the which is usually like a blockbuster, a production of epic proportions, right? And it was really seen that people thought at the time that yes, we have finally arrived. This is our time. You know, our years of hard work and toiling have finally put our art up there, right? And this is a picture of Minshall, right, in the Olympic Games, right? You'll also see images of Leroy Clark. This is Leroy Clark, this is Isaiah Bulu, and this is a very young Ken Critchlow, right? And what I'm trying to share with you is Jeffrey McLean was also the proprietor of, if you know Medulla Gallery now, right? That is run by Jeffrey McLean and Martin Luthe, right? Jeffrey McLean in the 1980s and 1990s ran Aquarella Gallery, which was on Deer Street in Port of Spain. And you could see in this little ad, trying to position this thing, right here is an ad at Aquarella for Patrick Foon, Leroy Clark, and Chris Cosier, right? I want to try to show you in this article. I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs, or some key paragraphs from the article written by Chris Cosier, because this is now considered to be an academic essay that is actually posted online in academic journals, but this is where it was first published in this magazine, and it's called "Searching for a Way Out." And what Chris Cosier is trying to argue basically is that Caribbean art has become sophisticated. And as I explained to you before, through that progression from Cazabon's realism, then to Cordayo's images of daily life, to Leroy Clark's African spirituality, to Minshall's conceptual art in the form of a masquerade, that Caribbean art was slowly getting more and more, actually specifically Trinidad's art was slowly becoming more and more sophisticated, right? And the problem was arising is that the art was becoming explicit. The art was sort of starting to push boundaries on what is decent. This here, if you can see it very clear, if you can see it carefully, is a sculpture. This particular piece right here, called Throne, by Francisco Cabral. Right? And so it's like a wooden high back chair with a fisheye mirror, right? And then within the back of the chair are images. We have two nude men and a nude woman, right? And there's a piece of galvanized on top here to kind of allude to our typical Caribbean structures. But obviously, you have a sculpture here with a fisheye mirror, so that as you look at these images, as a voyeur, as you look at these explicit images, right, the artwork looks back at you, right? So there's a fisheye, sort of representing like almost like a judgmental eye, so like the eye of God, looking back at you. So as you watch these images, right, as you either get repulsed or intrigued by these images, you have this particular mirror that's looking back at you like a fish island. And what he's trying to show, I mean, Cabral is trying to show, but Coase is talking about it, is this, you know, art is now pushing new boundaries, right? And yeah, thank you, Chloe. I'm glad you all like this piece actually, right? And it's the only example of it that I have. Um, but I spoke to you before. This was like I said. This was early 90s, probably about 1991, 1992. This image was created, and this sculpture was created. Sorry, but I want to allude to the image or the sculpture or the piece called Caribbean Basin that is considered to be the first work of Caribbean conceptual art. And if I can, find an image. Of course, it's a very small image I have to show you. This is a piece called "1922." No, no, not 1922. What are you talking about? I don't understand what 1922 is. The image I just sent, right, is a work. The chair. Yeah. Not 1922, it's 1992. All right, just want to make that really, 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 really clear. Again, Francisco Cabral, Chilean artist, right? So I just want to read very, very briefly the introduction. The name, the title of the piece is called "Searching for a Way Out." Right? The title of the piece is called "Searching for a Way Out." Right? So he starts. Let me just read the opening paragraph, and you can just walk back and listen to this because I wouldn't really, I want you to take it in. He says, in 1983, after Minshall's Mancrab crossed the Savannah stage, to be an artist began to mean something again in this society. To be a painter then was to be left standing with your brush in your hand. The response to this by the established artists of the day was to retreat even further into the refinement of their painterly commodities. There was little else for them to do, without critical support, discussion, and only social columnists to cue them. As a society, we may have been ushered out of the Garden of Eden, that naive disposition toward late 19th century art. One has to remember that Jackie Hingston's National Site and Pastoral Landscapes of Boodoo Boodoo's shifting stance between the charm of the Nabis and the bravura brushwork, if not the scale and boldness of abstract expressionist paintings, were not about anything more than mastering a prescribed form. Like most popular forms, Mancrab conveyed quite a number of things about us in a rather dynamic manner. It was personal obsession with public assertion. It moved in real space and time and to the rhythm of the drum. It was the drama of traditional macabre carnival portrayals, meeting with the Gothic tone of the New Wave theatre. It was Asian and Christian mythology, celebration, and ritual. Minshall, as an artist, had capitalized on carnival, used it as a raw material, a form to express himself, to animate our theatrical sensibility. This work dared to say that as a society, we had a point of view and a vital means to express it, a voice. Since this period, it has been difficult for our art to settle down. There was a turning point in our sensibility and in the demands that we made on our art. The question was, and is, are we making a thing it have called art? Or are we honestly expressing ourselves? And anxiety has set in. Should we then and now continue to manufacture jargon to preserve the convention, or should we now simply see it as just another indicator of where we have been and then get on with our lives? Looking at our art, there has always been the suspicion that it is anachronistic in the broader global sense, and also in relationship to our own cultural challenges. So what he's saying by that is that basically he's saying that our art is behind the times. It is not, most of our art in the realist genre, in the typical landscape portrait style, is a little bit, behind the times, a little bit old-fashioned, right? We often depend on the occasional hit and run by a foreign critic. We're saying here, going back to this, sorry. Bob Marley or Shabba Ranks cannot be seriously discussed in the same terms as the Limbo Man at the Hilton poolside. However, in the visual arts, we are wary of making these kinds of distinctions. We often depend on the occasional hit and run by a foreign critic. Right? The problem is always the conditions of value and understanding are never assured by us. So what he's saying is that, we always have to wait for validation from abroad. Right? As a result of this, our work may at best be seen as a coy, a gratuitous attempt to render a prescribed form their flotsam. The flotsam means the leftover wig, or at worst an anthropological artifact perpetually representative, the product of a context rather than that of an individual. The real meaning, the life of the work is never approached. Right. Peter Minshall was not referred to as anything more than a West Indian in one American magazine. Other contributors to the same event given individual rather than general references. Cabral, who I say is the creator of this work here, still struggles to become an artist from Trinidad or the Caribbean rather than a Trinidadian artist. They don't mean quite the same thing. The latter is often a condemnation. So he's trying to say very, very subtly there's a difference between saying that you're an artist from Trinidad as opposed to saying you're a Trinidadian artist. Right? Let me just type that in to stress that. So there is a yeah, get to that just talk, Anissa, as far as the colonial mentality is concerned. A way to also subtly saying in that particular terminology is that to say your artist function that sort of implies that you have your mind set, right? Um, Focused on beyond Trinidad, right? You say that your artist from Trinidad, well, your Anissa VRL Padmore, your artist from Trinidad, right? That sort of means that you have your mind, your focus is set on a broader artistic practice, right? Outside of Trinidad, and when you say that you are a Trinidadian artist, means that sort of insinuates that you're dealing with production and subject matter only inside of Trinidad. Okay, you all get that? Right, so I'll continue right now. To me, that means to Chris Crozier, this outsider status, historically and geographically, has been an advantage. With issue of culture, it has always been a game of power and perception. Our failure to build a context within which we see our art on our terms has seriously undermined our artistic growth and development. We have never allowed our artists to speak, and we have turned them into illustrators of our socio-political pettiness and cultural arrogance. Right? So he's just saying that, very similar to what I was trying to insinuate early on in the term of Casabor and his patronage, right? That although you are starting in a non used by using an anti-authoritarian platform, which was realism, right? It becomes the whole anti-authoritarian dimension or character of it becomes eroded in the Trinidadian context, right? By the way that the society, right, supports the art. Okay? So like I keep on saying before, same imagery, different meanings in different areas. Okay? You're something like Village the Gleaners, this is clearly about elevating the poor people. The gleaners of the poor, or the poor woman with the bent down, picking up things, picking up the remnants of the harvest. Right? But in Trinidad, yes, Casabor was trying to elevate the African laborer, the East Indian indentured servant as well too. He was elevating them through the arts, but the patronage wanted more landscapes. The patronage wanted more, idealized images, portraits of the aristocrats as well too. So that obviously dictates, you know, while you may have a certain ideal, right? Who is ultimately paying for your work essentially dictates what kind of work you create, at least the majority of it, right? And that's what is still being addressed here by Chris Cozier. Now you'll say like there's another thing I was happy Chloe made that point. You'll say, well, we need more articles like this, right? Again, the issue of patronage, these things cost money to create, right? And the real issue is that, should you have a publication that will allow you to rant, every so often about the problem that you're being faced with, and then, as you see, this was written in 1992. This is 28 years ago. Okay, these problems have existed for a long time, and they will continue to exist no matter how much you cry, how much you laugh, how much you beg, and how much you plead. These problems still continue, and when people write something like this, they don't want to say it again. Okay, but the problem now is obviously with newer generations like y'all don't understand the history, and that's why this is an art history course. This is part of the history that has taken place. This is part of the things that have been done over the several decades, and for the most part, they tend to get lost in the whole confusion of everything, right? What is just saying, there's a key paragraph I want to share with you. These artists, and you're talking about conceptual artists like himself, like Cabral, right, are functioning outside the traditional boundaries of taste. They are working their way outside of our idea of art for personal dignity rather than eloquence and good form. So what he's saying is that they're trying to make art that may or may not be aesthetically pleasing, right? That may offend, that may provoke, right? One of the things you will see in the video on Peter Minshall's River is that they wanted to make the man crab so much of a bad villain, so much of a despicable kind of character, that Minshall wanted to tell the people making the costume that even if the audience booed, right, rather than cheered on as they had done in previous carnivals, that the hatred of man crab would have been something that would have been something that he would have wanted, right? That it was supposed to offend the audience. It was supposed to disturb them. It was supposed to make them feel uneasy. That you had this character that, as he pranced around the stage to the tassa drums, and the clothes are moving, as he did that, the canopy on top of his head above him, right? There's a square of cloth above him, and it's slowly as he's doing this, the square of cloth is becoming splattered with blood, right? And as he's walking out of the stage, out of his midsection, is a red fabric that he is, pulling out from his midsection, and that's supposed to symbolize a trail of blood. So not only is he, destroying he's just this, representation of just, universal destruction. That, as he's destroying everything around him, he's also destroying himself too, and he's also destroying all the people around him as well too, right? So that is something that was meant to. It wasn't just art meant to please anymore. We live in a bad situation, so the art must reflect the extent of the problems that we are faced with, right? This is what Cozier is trying to say. Now later on, what he is trying to also insinuate is that that this type of art, because of the lack of support, can't continue to function inside of Trinidad alone. So he says in the end, these artists are functioning outside the traditional boundaries of taste. They acknowledge that there is a chasm between art and the life of our society, and so they have avoided making art in the traditional sense. They are working their way, like many others now, outside of our idea of art. It is a personal struggle to really express themselves, a struggle for empowerment, for personal dignity, rather than eloquence and good form. They don't want in, they want out. Right? So, like I said before, this was a really, really ambitious publication the time it was done. There were only about two issues, and it was stopped. Again, because of lack of support. Right? As we get into the issue of publication, again, um, let me just leave you all with some light-hearted anecdotes. You'll want to see this book that I put up on Instagram. It's called Bluff Your Way in Modern Art. And as we deal with it, as I start to share excerpts of the books with you, understand that in a general global art sense, right? Modern art was essentially work from the late 19th century with realism up to World War Two, right? Up to 1945, and from 1945 onwards, you have what's called a postmodern movement. We don't really have that kind of distinction in our Trinidadian context. We basically have I really try to categorize it into three main categories, which is the time of Casabo, the realism of Casabo, right? The Society of Independence, and then post-independent art, right? So the time of Casabo is roughly about 1850 to 1870, or roughly about that time. Then from 1930 to 1940, you have the Society of Independence. 1940 to 1950, 1940 to 1960, you have the Art Society in its early stage. And then from 1962 onwards, you have post-independence art in Trinidad. And post-independence art more or less continues up to about 1990. No, up to about 1983. Post-independence art continues from 1962 to about 1983 when you have Minstrel's River coming on. And from 1983, the current time, you have what's called conceptual art, right? And that is more or less our time period. So I will type it out for you all just to sum up the class very, very quickly. And I have one more piece to show you. So, right, so if I have a timeline for Trinidadian art, regions, right? Casamo's realism. I'm not sure I said there's a big gap. You have 1930s, 19. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here, but just for emphasis as we're wrapping up. And you can cross-reference this information, right, with the timeline I give for specific artists. And despite the Lloyd Clark coming on the scene in the 1970s, right, the Art Society continues. Note the destruction, and this is a key point in our art history again, is the destruction of Carlisle Chang's right? And our conservative, I'll put in brackets a conservative, our conservative art society inspired movement continues until and in that year, right, for conceptual art. So River in that year, Masters Art. And you also have John Sommers, Caribbean Basin, right? And the conceptual art kind of continues, has been the order of the day ever since then. Let me leave you with some, we're coming on to the end right now. Let me leave you with some key figures. Right? Again, I'm trying to leave everything in groups of 3. So key artists who are still around and still creating art: Steve Udet, Chris Cozier, and Wendy Nana. I want you all to look up work by Chris Cozier to leave you all with that. Right? So I'm kind of wrapping up the session right now. Any thoughts, any comments, anything that you would like to say before we go? A little bit of housekeeping. I haven't got any feedback from you as to your examination, so I don't know how that's going to work yet. Um, I'm tentatively putting the end of March 31st, as a tentative deadline for the essay, right? If there's a problem, please let me know. I'll put it up on the classroom map as a notice, okay? But I have to start receiving. We haven't seen the meme with the COVID-19 virus attacking Ian Allen, beating up Ian Allen, they juxtapose the picture of the virus over Alexander's head when he was arresting Ian Allen. Yeah, well, I mean, the COVID-19 thing has messed up everything, right? It has totally thrown everything off, including our art. It'd be really good to do artwork about that, you know? Yeah, people. So, no, I didn't really specify an outline, Chloe. I just said it's still. I have guidelines for the essay. The essay. It's the same length as what you did in 1904, but all right then, 1500 to 2000 if you want to be. But one must be, but both must be. Maybe true of it, right? Are we cool with that? You can message me or anything as far as if you want some more clarification. But it's now 10 to 8 and I've been going hill hard since. Two things I want to. Thank you. Okay. All right. You're very welcome, everybody. Right. Two things as well too. I want to. Yeah, that too. And like I keep on saying, the video is totally safe, 100% disease free. So you can do it, and you can do what you can do to make it go viral, right? Without any harm. Um, I just want to read, like I said, this book I found recently. I had bought this book after I did my first university course. I showed it to my professor, and he almost died laughing reading the book. Right, and it has a section I want to read from your how to become a modern artist. Let me go. Right, some parting words here. Salvador Dali thought a modern artist was a poet. And he says, quote, "Don't you think that we, the artists, are the only poets? the only ones who truly create new poetry. He wrote this to Federico Garcia Lorca himself. Picasso invented his own imaginary collection. Was a painter, you would ask. He's only a collector who wants to assemble a collection by his own means, his own versions of the pictures he likes by other artists. That's how I begin. It develops from there. That's actually a very interesting way of doing a very interesting reason to do artwork, right? If you can afford your own painting, because Picasso was dead broke when he first started, right? Do your own. Do your own artwork to fill up your own walls, and then you can start moving on from there and become famous, right? However, even if you are not driven by an inner absolute necessity, there are still some methods you can adopt to make other people think you are or will soon become well known. One, believe that a shape has more aesthetic value the less you can recognize it. Two, paint with one color and always the same one. Three, gather some garbage and arrange it like knickknacks on a shelf. Four, go to a scrapyard, crush together a few tons of scrap iron, and build a sculpture. After making it known, you are preparing a great work. 5. Patiently spend several decades painting white squares on white backgrounds, black circles on black backgrounds, or stripes of equal length in order to acquire a style and a name. If what you're doing is extremely boring, then you're well on the way to becoming a successful artist. In order to succeed, you must above all, 1. Be lucky, 2. Persevere, 3. Be prepared for people to laugh at you and still remain convinced of your own genius. All right, enough of that. Guidelines for the comparison, right? I would suggest that you choose two different works. But on a similar theme. Alright? You should, I guess, describe one. Then describe the other. Then and in the description state the strengths and weaknesses. Or state the unique way which one work right? So you sort of describe the next one, and then start to say, well, and then the third section will more or less be a comparison into how the works differ or are similar to each other. And you can kind of conclude in the end, sort of bring back the two together in the end by stating, how both of them, by addressing things in two different ways and offering two different points of views, is now giving you an overall better understanding of the theme that both works are describing or addressing. Right? All right, people. So this is our out of 4 sessions remaining. This is our second, so we only have 2 more. I haven't got any feedback yet as to how we're going to deal with it, but how the exam is going to go, I will update you as soon as I get that information. Right, but I thank you all for tuning up, for showing up and participating. Thank you all very, very much for your dedication and your support as well. Too. Okay, you're a really amazing class, as I said before, and may God bless you all, protect you all during the next upcoming week. and hopefully we can meet next Wednesday, or hopefully at least we'll be better informed by the university as to how we are proceeding. Okay? You're very welcome, everybody. All right? I'm out here. Peace out. God bless. Okay? Thank you. Bye.